Hello and welcome to the Warm Chord Music Podcast, where we talk everything music production. My name is Jay Croft and I'm the host of the show. Being that this is the first ever episode of the Warm Chord Music Podcast, I'd like to take a minute to give you an idea of what you can expect from this show. First of all, let's get the name of the podcast out of the way. Warm Chord Music is the name that I use when I release music, and it's the name of my website, which is currently in production. So while the main focus of the podcast won't be on my own music, there's definitely going to be some overlap and some discussion about it as I'm promoting new material when it becomes available. But the main focus of this podcast is to talk music with you guys. We'll be discussing the sonic qualities of specific albums and why they inspire people. You're going to hear interviews with independent artists, engineers, producers, even YouTubers, podcasters, and some small business owners that are part of the music community. We're going to be talking about your favorite albums, music equipment, events, and news that interests us, and much more. So, is this the right podcast for you? Well, if you're a musician, absolutely, this podcast will be right up your alley. If you're a music lover, someone that genuinely likes learning about music production and how albums are made, this is also for you. Now, while most of the music will be discussed is in the rock genre, other types of music will be welcome on the podcast. It's not going to be a one-dimensional podcast, but I can tell you that if you're into, hard rock, metal, punk, indie rock, pop rock, this is a good destination for you. If you're into country, hip hop, rap, bluegrass, jazz, we may touch on some things here and there that are in that genre, but we won't be hitting it too hard. So let's go ahead and get started with today's episode, which is actually part 1 of 3 in a series of discussions about Sweetwater's Gear Fest. So last weekend, which was June 23rd and 24th, I attended Gear Fest, which is a festival hosted at Sweetwater's retail location in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Gear Fest is an opportunity for musicians like me to learn about new equipment directly from manufacturers and learn about music production and performing techniques from professionals. So, for example, you had guitar players like Steve Stevens from Billy Idol and guitar virtuoso Eric Johnson doing clinics and performances, while you've got engineers like Chris Lord-Alge and Chuck Ainlay discussing their recording and mixing techniques. During my visit to Gear Fest, I was able to capture a few interviews, which we're going to play over the next few episodes. This first interview is with YouTuber and studio owner Glenn Fricker. Now, Glenn is based out of Windsor, Canada, which is just across the river from me here in Detroit, and I've been following his channel for a couple years now. If you want to look it up on YouTube, just go ahead and search under Spectresound Studios, and that's spelled S-P-E-C-T-R-E, and then Sound Studios. If you've never watched Glenn's channel before, you should give it a try. It's definitely not a dry show. He's up to about 205,000 subscribers now. And while he does gear reviews and recording and mixing techniques, it's the engagement with his subscribers, the viewers, and even the internet trolls that leave comments on his channel that will keep you coming back for more. So Glenn and I caught up at Gear Fest on Saturday. We talked about the success of his channel, his thoughts about Gear Fest, and of course his favorite recordings. We also get into how he discovered Rev amplification and turned a bunch of other YouTubers and their fans onto their guitar amps. I actually own a Rev Generator 120 Mark II, mostly because of Glenn's review of it, as well as other YouTubers that caught on to it, like Henning Pauly, Trey Xavier from Gear Gods, Fluff, Jared Dines. There's a whole bunch of them out there that have been featuring this amp, and we talk about that a little bit. We also talk about some other things that he's got planned for the show and the studio and how his studio business has been going. So I will tell you firsthand that Glenn's show is worth the hype. Check it out, give it an opportunity. After you hear this, I think you'll be able to tell that Glenn's a pretty cool guy. What you see is what you get with him. How he is in person is how he is on his channel. There's no act here. He's really a pretty genuine dude. So without any further delay, let's go ahead and play the interview with Glenn Fricker. So when did the channel start, and how did you start deciding what kind of topics and things like that you were going to do for it?
Yeah, I don't know. I got started on this maybe 2013, 2012, something like that. I don't even remember. Originally wanted to start doing some drum demo tutorials, and it didn't really work out so well. And then I made a video about how to get your band rep for the studio because I had seen people making the same mistakes over and over and over and over again. And that took off, and a lot of people saying, hey, make more. And I'm like, well, I kind of said what I wanted to say, and I'm really not sure what to do. And one thing leads to another, and I saw some bad microphone techniques, so I did how to hold a microphone. That did well, and I'm like, okay, I might be onto something here. So just started going on and on and on. I was director of photography on a small indie film in the summer of 2014, or spring of 2014, and I got fired off the crew because basically I can't work for idiots. I didn't see eye to eye with the director because I like to get shit done, and she wanted to just waste people's time. So, I'm like, well, fuck this. You know what? Everybody's been saying, hey, do more YouTube. Okay, fine. So I borrowed my buddy's Axe Effects and let's put it up against some real amps and see what happens. And then that took off, and I was like, okay. So, then, we started doing the interactive show, SMG Viewers Comments. So that's like a weekly thing where people ask me, be recording questions, I answer them, that kind of stuff. So just one thing after another.
So is YouTube becoming like your main thing now? I know you've been talking about trying to go that route.
Well, I got to see how it works out this summer anyway. I'm going to be partnering up with Pro Mix Academy, Warren Hewitt's recording school, and we're going to be doing some lessons on there. I plan on doing some advanced guitar miking stuff, maybe some drum stuff, some basic stuff too, introduction to recording, learning about EQ and compression and how all that stuff fits together, that sort of thing.
The Rev Generator 120. You and I, we talked about that the other day. Henning Pauly, Trey Xavier from Gear Gods, Fluff, Jared Dines, so many people now are going to that. Are you kind of the one that found them first? How did that whole relationship start with them?
Basically, I messaged them after NAMM 2015. I'm like, hey, you guys are Canadian. Why don't you guys send me an amp? I'd love to put it on the show. So they sent me an amp, and I'm like, wow. You're not getting this thing back. This thing's amazing. It was literally the best sounding amp I'd ever heard. So,
that's great. That amp is amazing. What about Gearfest for you? What do you get out of this? What do you look forward to? You said this is your second time going here. What do you like?
I'm just here to meet people. I mean, it's one thing, for me to, be on camera and talk to you guys and whatnot. But I mean, it's something else to actually meet people, and that's why I'm here. I'm just here to shake hands, say, hey, how's it going? Thanks for supporting the show, that kind of thing, because you guys are what make it happen, not me.
Anything that stood out to you that you've seen? You've probably seen a lot of this stuff at NAMM already. Anything you've thought about picking up?
Well, I did see some 500 series rack mount stuff, mic preamps and compressors and stuff. They're actually remote controlled via software through USB, and that was really freaking cool. It's like you pull it up and it's basically a plug-in, but you actually have an analog signal path and a rack unit being controlled that way. That looked pretty awesome, and it's instantly callable, automatable, all that shit.
What did you think about the Aston microphones, the Starlight with the laser thing? Is that
no, that might be pretty cool. I definitely want to try those out. So we were talking, and hopefully you're going to see them on the show. I've had a bunch of kids ask me to try the Aston stuff out, so we're going to take a look, see about making it happen.
Now, how's the studio going for you since the YouTube channel's been going well? Any impact at all?
Yeah, well, I get a lot of people asking me, hey, can we record with you? Can we record with you? That happens a lot more than it used to.
That's great. Last thing for me, one thing we do on the show now is kind of ask you guys what albums inspired you from a record production standpoint, not just songwriting, but you put that record on, it really got you into recording and made you want to do this.
Judas Priest, Screaming for Vengeance, Megadeth, Peace Sells. There was a really killer drum sound on that record. Corrosion of Conformity, Blind is one of my absolute favorites in terms of production. It was just, such a monstrous guitar sound. The drums were just like gunshots. Of course, Metallica's Black Album, to Painkiller to an extent. Really love the drum sound on that record. There's a lot of stuff in the late 80s, early 90s that was really, really amazing in terms of production that we just don't get anymore.
Well, thank you so much for taking some time. I greatly appreciate it. It was great to meet you.
Oh, no problem, man. My pleasure.
All right. So that was my interview with Glenn. Pretty short and sweet, but it was definitely cool to chat with him at Gearfest last weekend and get to know him a bit. Again, if you haven't already, give Glenn's channel a watch on YouTube, which is called Spectresound Studios. I want to thank Glenn for his time and especially you for giving this podcast a listen. I have a lot of great topics and guests lined up for the future, so please keep listening to hear some cool stuff coming forward. The next episode will feature an interview with my Sweetwater sales engineer, Robert Williams, who talks to me about what it's like to work at Sweetwater and prepare for GearFest, his thoughts about the festival in general, and his favorite album. So please make sure to follow this podcast on SoundCloud and subscribe to iTunes once it becomes available so that you get notified of new episodes. If you are interested in supporting the Warm Chord Music Podcast and the launch of the new website, as well as my music releases, I have a Patreon account. Just go to patreon.com and search under Warm Chord Music, and you'll find it. I already have some blog posts up there, and all Patreons will get access to an exclusive blog and some podcasts that are going to feature extended interviews and other content that won't be available to everyone else. So thank you again for your support, and we'll talk music again soon.